Dude, he's so witty. It's like,
I mean, I'm actually the nicest guy in the world, just not on the internet.
he is probably one of the wittiest people I've ever.
He is
and
hilarious.
Are you trying to kill your career right now, or what? What's going on? I gotta remain mysterious.
Sean McCorkle's a funny fucking guy. He said some ridiculous shit online.
I don't know. Is he still alive? All right. I can't do this anymore. That is way over the line. I think this might be the end of the MMA hour. I think you might just kill my show.
And we are back with episode 5 of the McCorkle Minute. I know it's been a little while. I had several issues that have delayed the episode release. Obviously you have the holidays, which are typically pretty busy. I also had a 13-day bout of food poisoning or some bizarre illness that I don't know where I picked up from, where I was so sick I lost 37 pounds in 13 days, could not eat or drink almost anything. Probably need to go to the hospital repeatedly, but I couldn't afford to do that because, I could financially afford to do it, but I couldn't do the whole hospital thing or the whole ER thing because I had a surgery on my back scheduled. And if they find out you've even sneezed at any point 2 weeks before surgery, they won't go through with it. It was a surgery I'd been waiting 10 months for because the doctor is very highly regarded and apparently very backed up on his schedule. So I had to just tough it out and just didn't really feel like, as strong as the drive is for me to trash Brendan Schaub on a daily basis, I just wasn't up for doing a podcast while that sick. So I also have decided that instead of trying to perfect every podcast, which never works out anyway, but instead of trying to go through and correct every audio glitch and every time I say or every time I breathe into the microphone or every time I mess up in any fashion whatsoever, trying to go back and correct it and make it perfect, which doesn't really improve the listening experience that much to begin with, I can actually turn these out a lot faster. So that's where we're at. A lot has obviously transpired in the past month or so. The big news, Cat Williams dropping his interview with Shannon Sharpe. It was a very shocking interview in many ways. Probably most shocking is that Shannon Sharpe at no point said skip, because I didn't know it was even possible for him to go more than 10 to 15 seconds at a time without saying, come on, skip, skip, skip. So that was surprising, but I found it very, very interesting and really funny, his whole interview. It's hilarious to watch people get called out. But Cat Williams, I don't know. I've always been a fan. I attended one of his, I don't know if you call it a concert, one of his performances or whatever a few years back, and was probably one of the only white people in the crowd. Probably feel like how a black guy feels if he goes to a Trump rally. So I was on the other end of it for once, but yeah, it's been a heck of a few couple months here since my last podcast. And another reason also, not that you guys really care, but another reason why I've been off for a while, YouTube decided they would delete almost all my listening hours and almost all my videos and everything. I don't know what happened. I uploaded a video strictly to make people laugh because I thought it was funny, like a 2 or 3 minute video of when Dana White and Theo Vaughn were trashing the Peloton bike company, and I shared it more in a sense like where you would send it all to, to your friends on Instagram or Facebook, like, hey, check this out, this is hilarious. I just put it on my YouTube channel. I was already almost at the limit to monetize my channel as far as how many listening hours I had, and already there well past the number of followers and all their little requirements. And that video I uploaded alone took off and got a couple 100,000 views, and I don't even know how many watch hours, but it was well over. If I had uploaded only that video, it would have been enough for me to monetize my channel. So I was double, triple the amount of required followers and watch time. So I go to monetize my channel, and I believe because of that upload, they told me that I was trying to game the system basically by uploading other people's content But even without that video, I was far over the requirements. So they give you a chance. You can either appeal it and explain why they shouldn't have done it. But if you lose your appeal, they delete your channel completely or something way overboard. Or you can remove whatever content they didn't like, which they don't tell you what content they don't like, but you can delete whatever content they don't like, and then you can reapply. So I deleted that video. I deleted any video where, I guess what I should have been doing was showing the video of Dana White and Theo talking about Peloton in a little box and me just reacting to it by pointing at it or laughing or shaking my head, because apparently that's enough to make it your own. But I didn't want to do that, because who wants to see my giant fat face reacting to someone else's video? You know, like I just don't know. So, like I said, it wasn't an attempt to gain viewership or watch hours to monetize my channel. I was already 90% of the way there before I uploaded that. I just was trying to share it because I thought it was really funny, and it was really funny. But as it turns out, there was some kind of retroactive, I don't know, penalty, and now I'm down to 1,000 watch hours from being up to like 3,800 before that video, and they've just, I don't know, a bunch of my videos are deleted. I don't think they understand that a lot of the videos I uploaded I own. Like, just because they were on another channel that I had, let someone upload, like maybe somebody recorded an interview with me, but I was paying the guy for the interview, or I agreed that I had ownership of the interview too. Can't really explain that to a bot or an AI algorithm, but they're saying that I'm just more or less accusing me of just taking other people's content and putting it up. But in many cases, it was my content I was just re-uploading onto my channel. There were videos of my fights that I paid to have filmed that I uploaded, that apparently, since I took them off of YouTube and re-uploaded them onto my channel, I don't own, I guess, in their opinion. So might have to do a few podcasts here to get my watch hours up, but that's very disheartening when you're trying to monetize your channel. Enough of the unfunny stuff. Hope you guys all had a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. I hate Christmas now and New Year. I've had nothing but bad luck for like 10 years straight. From almost dying in a car wreck last year on Christmas Eve to just anything you can imagine bad. It always happens on the holidays for me. So haven't really enjoyed the holidays much, so I hope your guys' holidays were better. I did have a story that was requested I tell. I told it on Adam Hunter's MMA Roasted podcast, but I thought I would start with that this week because it's really funny, I think. And hopefully none of my family members that are involved in this story will listen to it, because I don't think they're aware of the true story behind the situation. But jumping right into it, I had a kind of a crazy family. My dad had a really, really rough upbringing. There wasn't really much funny about it, except I guess looking back, but my dad had just an insane upbringing and a crazy cast of characters that surrounded him. But I had an uncle who will remain unnamed, or for his family's sake, let's say he was a step uncle that no one knows and only I've met. But I had an uncle who was odd to say the least. But he, for example, he was convinced that I didn't belong to my son, or belong to my father, like I wasn't his actual son, because I didn't look like him, and I looked just like our mailman, apparently. It was, I don't know, our mailman was Andre the Giant, so I guess that would explain why my dad was 6 foot tall, my mom's 5'3", and I ended up being 6'7", but yeah, he was obsessed with, he didn't think his son was his actual son. He thought his wife had cheated on him, and he used to tell people all the time, in 50% of homes, one of the sons or daughters doesn't belong to the dad. He just had these weird thoughts about life and these weird ways of thinking about things. So he was working at, let's say, Amazon, for the sake of keeping this disguise from my family members who were close to him and whose feelings this would hurt should they listen to it. So yeah, he was working at Amazon, let's say, in the 1970s or 80s. But him and his friends, as they often do, guys that work at factories, kind of razzing each other, busting their balls, giving them a hard time. And he was kind of famous for being able to dish it out and not take it, as many people are. So he said something about some guy's wife or whatever. They're teasing each other one day. He's like, yeah, that's what your wife will be saying tonight. And this guy, his co-worker, says to him, well, It's better than your wife. He said, I was driving by your house the other day. I saw a real big black guy coming out of the house midday while you were at work, and I wondered, hey, I wonder if said uncle knows that there's a black guy in his house during the day. It doesn't matter what color the guy was, but apparently it mattered to my uncle. And so my uncle says, what do you mean? What'd you see? And everyone that was listening to them roast each other could see that that really shook my uncle. Like, it kind of shook his confidence, because he, the guy that was convinced his own son wasn't his son and that his wife was a cheater. And I guess this isn't funny unless you're on the outside looking in, but it was funny to me. And keep in mind, I'm a kid when this happened. Like, I'm 4, 5, 6 years old. So it kind of shook him. And so when the guys see that, then every joke from that point on becomes, oh yeah, well, how's Tyrone doing? Is your wife still seeing him? And just everything becomes, about Tyrone and about this guy that everybody's seeing. And everybody starts saying it. They start saying that they saw his wife or this big black guy leaving his house, or they saw his wife somewhere out with this guy. So it gets to the point that my uncle starts doing like some cloak and dagger type shit, where he's putting like Scotch tape across doorways to see if they, if the attic door was open. I don't know why the big black guy would be coming in and out of the attic, but or he's putting baby powder at the back door entrance to see if there's any footprints there. The guys at work just keep razzing him. They keep talking about Tyrone, and ask Tyrone what he thinks. And I saw Tyrone the other night at a bar. He said, your wife is really giving it up a lot lately, and just they're on him all the time. And so it gets to a point where he starts staying home from work and watching from across the street, fake going to work and watching from a driveway, across the street, parking, checking to see if there's any black guys coming in or out of his house. Meanwhile, his wife is the sweetest lady ever. She looked like Chuck Daly, the coach of the Pistons. She was my aunt, very sweet lady. But he starts getting so paranoid, he starts taking a gun to work, starts threatening people, saying if they don't tell him immediately the next time they see, Tyrone coming out of his house, they better call him immediately, even though there were no cell phones in those days, or they better get a hold of him immediately. I don't know if they were going to send him a telegram or what, in the late 70s, but he wanted to know right away because he was going to go find him. And it gets to a point where, they realize someone's going to have to do something, because he's either going to go on a shooting spree at work or kill his wife or something. So my dad, being the manly man he was and the most, reasonable guy of his family, decides it's his responsibility to talk to his brother, who's 7 or 8 years older than him. But he goes and talks to him, and he's like, Kevin, let's say, I don't really think your wife would cheat on you. I've known her since we were kids. I don't, she doesn't seem like that to me. And he's like, oh, you don't know the real her, this and that. So then my dad decides to try a different angle, and my dad's like, listen, no offense, she's not some real prize, like, it isn't like, I don't think she's got a lot of men chasing her. I mean, she does look like Chuck Daly. So I don't think there's a lot of guys after her. I don't think she would cheat on you, like, when would she have the opportunity? I mean, you're there all the time, I mean, not all the time, but you haven't found any footprints in the baby powder. You haven't found any broken Scotch tape, which are, always the telltale signs. And my uncle's like, no, you don't get it. That's why she does it, because she's not a prize. She likes the attention. So he's absolutely convinced. So it gets to a point where it's so dangerous, my dad has to have him committed when they still had mental hospitals, like state-run mental hospitals. And they start doing electroshock treatment on him, apparently, when that was still legal. And so he got a couple zaps of that, and then he decided right away he doesn't believe it at all anymore, and she's completely loyal to him, and he's never bringing it up again. Like, so he pretty much like, no, I'm healed now. It's good. Like, because he didn't want any more of that, which I don't blame him. I wouldn't either. But he's decided he's not going to take any more electroshock therapy, so he'll just start saying whatever he needs to say, which I don't know if you guys have ever done any kind of psychological testing or anything like that, but it's always best to just tell them what they want to hear. I found out the hard way when I was trying to have a procedure done to my back, and they said it was required to do psychological testing before, and they started asking you personal questions, and then, like, have you ever thought about killing anybody? And I was like, other than Brendan Schaub, no. But, if you're actually honest about your feelings or about things you've thought about, then they label you crazy. So it's best just to play the game. So he starts telling them, oh no, I don't believe that anymore. I don't think that anymore. I was just being paranoid. I just have repressed guilt from cheating on her when we were first married. Hopefully not with black guys. But yeah, he, starts playing the game. So they let him out and everything's fine again. So he stops bringing it up. He stops going to following her places and stops watching his house and stuff. But my dad realizes he's got to get out of that job, because those guys, even knowing he was institutionalized, they can't wait to jump on him the minute he goes back to work. Like, oh, did they convince you it's not actually happening? And they're just completely terrorizing him again. So my dad helps get him a different job. Long story, helps get him a different job, get in a different place. But the suspicion continues over the, period of his life. There's, incidents here and there. So this all ends, as far as I know, by the time I'm, 7 years old, 8 years old. We don't hear about it anymore. It doesn't get brought up for what has to be 25 to 30 years. We never talk about it again. We never anything. So everybody kind of just swept it under the rug, and just, the baby powder covered rug at the doorstep, we just swept it underneath that along with the baby powder. And we still not sure what the baby powder was going to prove, that someone had stepped on the rug, I guess, or stepped or entered the house. Like, I don't know. I don't know if he was going to do some kind of forensic thing and test the boot print or shoe print or what. I don't know. So, but that was his method. So sadly, he dies many years later, and of cancer. It was actually pretty bad. He suffered at the end. It was really, really bad. So it was sad. And like I said, he wasn't a bad guy. He had his issues, but he was a pretty good guy overall. So we're at his funeral, and at this time I'm probably mid-30s, I would say. So, like I said, it's been close to 30 years since we've even talked about that whole issue. We're sitting there during the funeral, and I'm feeling bad for my dad, because it's, his third or fourth brother that's died over a year span. It was a really rough, time during that time in my dad's life and our family's life. And so he dies, and we're at the funeral, and I'm sitting next to my brother, who has a knack for saying really inappropriate things at really inappropriate times, but they're also typically really funny. So we're sitting there, and it's kind of, they're giving, the eulogy or whatever they call it. There's people getting up talking about him. And my brother leans over to me, and he says, I knew that asshole Tyrone wouldn't have the balls to show up to this today. Just whispers it to me, and this is right in the middle of a funeral, and like I said, a 30-year callback, like, to a joke. We hadn't even thought or talked about that. So my brother whispers that to me, and he just stares at me and gives me this look, trying to make me laugh during a funeral. And so, like, I start to get, like, tears in my eyes, trying to hold a straight face. And my brother just keeps looking at me. He just keeps staring at me after he says it, to try to, make me break. And so I'm holding it together. I'm sitting there, but as I feel a single tear stream down my right cheek as I'm trying not to laugh at my uncle's funeral. And as God is my witness, out of nowhere, this is toward the end of the funeral, 5 minutes after he said that, a big black guy, the only black guy that was there, that none of us knew, shows up and sits in the back row. And me and my brother both see him come in, and he's not really fitting in, not just because he's black, but because none of us knew him. And my uncle wasn't the most or least racist guy in the world, so it's very unlikely he had a African-American friend we didn't know about. So I see him, and I'm thinking, surely my brother isn't going to say anything else about that, but we're both thinking the same thing. And all of a sudden I hear, without making eye contact with my brother, I hear a whisper into my ear, looks like I was wrong. And when he said that, it broke me. I couldn't take it anymore. So I get up and I'm laughing, like dying laughing, but I had to cover my face and act like I was crying because I was so upset. So I make a V line for the bathroom, which isn't too far from, where the little funeral area is. I go straight to the bathroom, and I lock the door behind me and fall on the floor in the bathroom laughing, like absolutely laughing my ass off, trying to not make any noise, just dying. But from my brother said later from the outside, it sounded like I had broken down and just started having, just throwing a fit, crying in there. And so I'm losing it in there. And the harder I try to get myself together and not laugh, it's harder and harder, as it is in many cases when something funny is going on, for you not to laugh. So I'm in there probably 10 minutes trying to compose myself, and I'm trying to like wipe my face off. I'm trying to put water on my face because it's red from laughing. My eyes are bloodshot. Like, I really laughed really hard. So probably damn near had a stroke. So I come walking out, and they've since given the last, rites or whatever they do. And everybody's kind of walking down the line, to see him one last time or whatever. And Tyrone is missing, or the guy that we assumed was Tyrone. Probably not really. The black guy who showed up was no longer in there. And so everybody's doing their walk by the casket, saying goodbye at the last moment. And I can tell my dad's, my dad was kind of like Don Fry without, if Don Fry hadn't been drinking sand and chewing gravel for the past 20 years, like I'm not sure exactly what happened to Don's voice, but my dad was very manly, so it wasn't like him. I only saw him cry once in his entire life, and so he wasn't crying. He was a little bit teary-eyed during this part. But I go up and I figure to try to cheer up my dad, I'll tell him what just happened. And when I told him about, the story I just told you guys, my dad starts laughing, which creates a little bit of a scene at the funeral because it's not a place where he should be laughing. But my dad thought it was the funniest thing ever. And my dad, who wasn't always known for having the most tact, then turns around and tells his nephew and niece and the wife of his deceased brother what happened, that joke, and that my brother said it. Needless to say, they didn't think it was funny, and things got awkward. They were kind of just looking at him like, okay, like that's, I don't know why you think that's funny. I don't know. It wasn't necessarily, wasn't as funny to them as it was to us. So, yeah, that was a story I told on Adam's podcast, and people kept wanting it repeated, so I figured I'd take another chance, and just in case any of his close family doesn't listen to MMA Roasted, maybe they'll hear it on here and hate me forever. So, but it wasn't personal. It just, I don't know. It's always funnier when I guess it's not your dad. Sometimes it is funny when it happens to your family. Another story I had about my dad that everyone seems to appreciate that I've told very few people. I've never told on a podcast before, but as I said, my dad was an extremely manly man, but for whatever reason, he had this odd idiosyncrasy about him where when he was on the phone, he talked like the gayest guy this side of Elton John. Like, I don't know what, like his voice went from a regular voice to a super gay voice only on the phone, though. It was an odd thing. And it was weird at drive-thrus too. My dad would go through like a drive-thru, and he would get nervous like at every drive-thru, and he would talk to the people as if they couldn't hear him and as if they were the dumbest person that ever lived. So we would be going through a drive-thru, and my dad would be like, yeah, now listen, this is what I would like. I would like a cheeseburger. Now listen, just a cheeseburger with cheese and meat on it, and lettuce and tomato, because he was from the South. Tomato. Now listen, I want fries with that and a large Coke. Now listen, that's a cheeseburger with fries and a large Coke. And they'd be like, sir, you don't have to yell. We can hear you. Okay, now, I would also like, and then if they interrupted him, he would get so frustrated. He'd be like, let me finish. Like it was, I don't know. It was always something. So my dad went from the manliest guy ever to just, I don't know, a different person at drive-thrus. Well, on the phone, I would hear him make calls. So let's say he's calling the license branch. I don't know. And he would go from talking with a normal voice like mine to all of a sudden, yes, hon, I would like to renew my driver's license. So I was wondering if there was any way you could tell me how to proceed. And we were always like, what the hell is with that? I guess it was to a degree that even when my mom started dating my dad was recently divorced, like 26 when he met my mom. I think my mom was 19 or 20. And it was so bad on the phone that my mom's dad, who also was a pretty manly guy, I guess, when my dad would call for her and be like, yeah, is Jennifer home? Her dad would be like, Jennifer, the fag's on the phone. I don't know if I'm allowed to say fag on YouTube, but I don't really care. Or he would say, the funny boy's on the phone, like always said something, and he hadn't met my dad yet. I guess he was probably pretty surprised when he met him and found out he was pretty masculine, but just the way he talked on the phone was very feminine, and no one knew why. The same way we didn't know why he talked the way he did at drive-thrus. So I finally got the courage up one day to talk to a girl in 8th grade. There was a girl I liked. She was in 7th grade. I was in 8th grade, and she was the only girl at the school. I went to a really small school. But the only girl at the school or in either, junior high class who wasn't in love with me because I was so charming and handsome. But no, just because I was the new kid and I was coming in from a big public school to the small private school, so I was the coolest new kid or whatever, best, athlete in the class, best whatever. So, and not a bad looking young man. So every girl liked me. And like I said, they weren't exactly 10s, but whatever. Was a big deal when you're in 8th grade, but there was just one girl that never paid attention to me, so I obviously was drawn to her just because she didn't pay attention to me. She didn't care if I lived or died, and so it's always the one you think you can't have that you want. But I finally got the courage to call her one night, and just out of nowhere, I got her number from somebody, and I call her, and she's like, "Who's this?" And I said, "It's Sean McCorkle from school or whatever," as opposed to the other Sean McCorkle she knows. But no, I said, "Sean McCorkle," and she was like, okay. And then I'm like talking to her, and she's like, "Why are you calling?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm just calling to talk to you." It was the most awkward thing ever. I'm sure you guys know how it is when you're 13 years old trying to talk to a girl for the first time on the phone. I don't know. So this is back when there were only landlines, no cell phones, obviously. And so I'm trying to talk to her, and the very first time I don't know, 2 minutes in, it's finally going good. She's actually talking to me. I'd never said a word to her at school. Like nothing. So it's, really awkward, and I'm trying to sound cool. And then all of a sudden, someone picks up the line at my house on the other end, and I hear a voice say, "Sean, hun, I need to use the phone. So if you could please get off in the next few minutes, I would really appreciate it," which is not at all like how if my dad were to walk in the room, he would tell you, "Get off the phone, I need it." But I think he wanted to sound not abusive or not mean, I guess, if my friend was listening or girl was listening in. So he reverted back to his gay voice, like on the phone. And so I said, okay, like I'll be off in a second. And he hangs up, and the girl starts dying laughing and says, "Who the hell was that?" And I was like, "Oh, that's just my brother trying to be funny, And she's like, "Your brother calls you a hun?" And I was like, I don't even, I guess that's better than my dad calling me a hun. My dad had never called me hun in my life. I don't know where the hell that came from, but it was pretty humiliating. So, yeah, I don't know. My dad he was one of a kind, I'll tell you what. So I want to share those ones with you guys. Moving on. Any of you that have listened to any of my podcasts before have probably gathered by now that I had a very odd childhood. It was just really different than most people's upbringings, and from having 2 convicted pedophiles living with us from the time I was 10 or 11 years old until I was 18 to just crazy setups, man. I wouldn't change it now. I would change some parts of it now, but for the most part, I wouldn't change any of it. It was definitely an interesting way to grow up, and it's always funnier looking back than it maybe was at the time. But I did have a story I was reminded of this week that I thought I would tell you guys, and it involves the first time hopefully the first time and I think only time I was ever molested as a kid. I do have a time I remember that I'll tell you about too, that I don't know if it was a dream or if I was actually molested. We had, I'll tell you that one first. We had an odd aunt. She was a real oddball. She was actually like the worst mom, worst person ever, but just a low life. But I had an odd aunt I had dreams about when I was a kid all the time, that she was trying to make out with me, and she was like 8 or 9 years older than me, and I was, when I was having the dreams, the house we lived at, I was only 5 when I lived there, so she'd have been probably 14 or 15, but I kept having these dreams that she was trying to make out with me, like kiss me open mouth and just weird stuff. And looking back, I realized as I got older, maybe it wasn't a dream, just a repressed memory, I don't know, but she wasn't even good looking, like that's what's even worse, but they caught her, I don't know, trying to breastfeed my brother when he was 2 years old, and she was like 13 or 14, she just an oddball. But that was a time I was possibly molested. But the time that I would consider actually being molested was, if it wasn't so funny, I wouldn't tell it. But it wasn't traumatizing. It wasn't I mean, I don't think so anyway. But when you grow up in a white trash family like me, it's not at all uncommon to take baths together when there's, 3 or 4 boys or whatever. You only have one bathroom, and you have your cousins over or whatever, and everybody gets dirty playing outside, and you're 5 years old, your cousin's 22. No. But yeah, it's just, it's not odd to put kids in that day and age. It wasn't odd to put 3 or 4 kids in the bath together and just shower them all off real quick. And then, when they're innocent like that, you don't have anything to worry about typically. But I had a cousin who was about 3 years older than me when I was 5 or 6. And we were in the bath one time together. He had come over to spend the night with us, and my mom's in there, like showering us off, whatever, tells you guys wash your hair, whatever, telling us to get clean or whatever. And she leaves the room to go take care of the numerous other kids we probably, my brothers or the other kids that were spending the night or whatever, other cousins. And my cousin comes up with this great idea where he asked me if I wanted to play a game called Rocket Ship, He was even going to let me be the captain. Like, I was pretty excited about it. I was like, man, it's my first day of deployment. I'm already the captain? Like, I get to be the captain of the ship? That's awesome. Like, I expected to just, have to swab the deck or whatever, but apparently I'm going to be the captain my first day after being deployed. So I was like, yeah, that's awesome. Okay, cool. What do we do? He said, well, I'll tell you what, and keep in mind, I'm 4 or 5 years old. He's 7 or 8. He was like, you sit like on my knees. I'm going to lay down in the bathtub, and you sit like on my knees facing me, and I'll be the rocket ship and you be the pilot. And I was like, okay. And it doesn't take much imagination for you guys to guess what part of his body controlled the rocket ship, like what the, control handle was. But he wanted me to pilot the rocket ship, and whichever way the control stick went is the direction he would go. So I got to say, I did a pretty good job of piloting the ship given the unusual circumstances, but he thought, my cousin thought I would forget about this, which I never did, because it was a little traumatizing, I guess. But, it wasn't like, it went on for 20 seconds until my mom came back in the room. So it wasn't a very long trip. But afterward, I kind of felt, like maybe how the pilots that in the military that pilot the drones that do strikes on innocent people feel kind of like a sense of just shame with what you've just done, like at least that's how I imagine they would feel, or how I would feel. That's how I felt after piloting my first rocket ship. So years later, that cousin would end up working for me for a change. He was piloting the rocket ship. No, he would work for me later on. We were roasting each other one day in front of all my other employees. He said something to me, I said something back to him. We're going back and forth, and it's rare that I can be beaten in any sort of roast battle, but he got me with a good one. Whatever it was, I don't remember, and I didn't really have a response, and all my employees, most of whom were my childhood friends, are all like, oh, like just really give me a hard time as if he just beat me in a rap battle or something. I don't know. So I had to go nuclear on him because, I wasn't about to lose this roast battle with him. So I was like, yeah. I said, he goes, oh, what's the matter? Can't think of anything? I said, no, I was a little busy having flashbacks just now. Sorry. And he's like, flashbacks? And I was like, yeah, the time, when I had to pilot the rocket ship. And I saw his face immediately turn blood red, like with embarrassment, which means he remembered it. Not just, I wasn't the only one that remembered. He remembered, which he was 3 years older than me. He should have. So he's like, I don't know what you mean. And I was like, you don't? And everybody's like, what are you talking about? The rocket ship. So I tell that story, and he's denying it to the end about how he was wanted to play a game called Rocket Ship and this and that. How he made me the pilot, and said the same thing. I'll give you guys one guess. What part of his body controlled the rocket ship? So it, of course, I completely destroyed him in the roast battle, and he became, everybody started calling him Apollo or, whatever the name of the rocket ships were that went to the moon, allegedly. From that point on, like when you drive down to Florida through Huntsville, Alabama, if any of you have done that, I'm sure you've seen the big rocket ship that's down there that actually went to the moon, I guess. They have it still there on display at a rest area or something, and I'd always take a picture of it every time after that and send it to him and be like, hey, thinking of you, or anytime there was a movie, like the Tom Hanks Apollo 13 or whatever that movie was called. I'd be like, man, what do you think about Tom Hanks' technique controlling that rocket ship, and send it to him, like a video of it. I always gave him a hard time about it. He's dead now, so I guess I can't tease him about it anymore. Fortunately for him, no one thought his wife was banging a black guy, so I didn't laugh at him at his funeral. Didn't even actually attend it. It was really out of state, and I had things to do. But that was a story that, ironically, despite growing up with 2 convicted professional pedophiles, I was actually molested first by my cousin. So, and maybe first by my aunt even before that. I don't know. I think she beat him all to it. But speaking of being molested, has nothing to do with what I was talking about. My fiance and I, she insists I call her my fiance, not girlfriend. Makes me sound old and a little gay. We were eating the other night at a German, some kind of German, not pub, I don't know, just this German restaurant, but looks like a church. I don't know what they call it. But we were, I'll finish up with this story because I've gone on too long at this point anyway. But I had such a demand. I've had at least 7 people ask me when I'm dropping a new episode, so I figured I'd go ahead and finish it and do it today and get it out there. But, so, a couple weeks ago, my fiance and I are at this German place of some kind. It's a restaurant, and they're having some kind of celebration or something. I don't know. It's after Thanksgiving, before Christmas, so whatever you're celebrating then. So we're sitting there, and we're ordering our German-style food. And there's a group of people that are being real loud behind us and, just obnoxious and drunk. And one of the guys yells out, "I'm not even German." And everyone lost it. Or no, he said, "It turns out I'm not even German." And everyone lost it, at the table. They're dying laughing. And I couldn't help but wonder, having not been able to hear the earlier part of that conversation, what could he have possibly preceded that statement with that would make that such a great punchline? My fiance and I had started to, my girlfriend, I'm just going to call her my girlfriend, and I had started to theorize what he could have possibly said before that would make sense under any circumstance where that would be really funny. And I guess it probably depends more on his audience that was with him as opposed to the punchline of why that was funny. I mean, he could have been like, I ordered German bratwurst, and then turns out I'm not even German, and that wouldn't be that funny, I guess, or maybe a story about him going through, customs, and he claimed he was from Germany, but it turns out I'm not even German. I don't know, but the best one I could come up with was, I theorized he was like, so here I am at Auschwitz, right? And I'm, working the guard tower. I'm participating in the Holocaust. Turns out 30 years later, I find out I'm not even German. That was that was a theory I finally came up with, that he probably, maybe I should cut that out. I don't know. But anyway, I thought it was really funny. But from that point on, anytime, since then, over these past couple of weeks, whenever I tell a joke that doesn't work, I just followed up with, I'm not even German. And it makes at least me laugh, nobody else. Let me see. What else did I have? Told you guys about being molested. Told you about the guy not being German. I told you about laughing at my uncle's funeral. I'll leave you with one more. I'm trying to decide what last story to leave you with. And hopefully you guys will still follow me. I am still working on the Brendan Schaub documentary. I'm going to break it up into pieces. I was going to do this big, long documentary called The Intervention of Brendan Schaub, but I'm going to just break it up into pieces, because by the time I get it done, chances are he won't even be doing stand-up comedy anymore with the way things are going. Still frequent the Reddit page, and I feel like if I don't go to the Reddit page every day, if I miss a day or two, it's kind of like watching the TV series Lost or something like that. If I miss 2 days on the Reddit page, I'm completely lost. I have no idea what has happened or where we're at, and it reminds me of like a TV series that if you miss one episode, you're completely out of the loop. So for everyone asking, I am still working on that. I don't know. I had part of it's going to release, and I heard that his baby had some, health problems at the hospital. Not that he's the dad of the year. I had been through that myself, and I was like, I don't want to shit on a guy when that's going on. I'd rather shit on him when things in his life are going a little better. That is coming out eventually. I am going to do that. I know I keep putting it off, but I was actually kind of putting it off until I got monetized, but since YouTube has screwed me out of my watch hours and views, it looks like I'm going to have to probably do a couple episodes of the Brendan Schaub intervention, or the intervention of Brendan Schaub, whichever way you want to put it, in order to even get my view hours back up, since they robbed me of all of them. It's just an attempt to keep me non-monetized, I guess, because Lord knows my 3,000 views a month will pay me at least like $7. So my last one, I think I'll finish with just a quick story about the UFC. A lot of people ask me about the behind-the-scenes stuff of the UFC and how things work, which, it really is, I guess, interesting. If you've never been through it before, like the UFC gives you a per diem, when you get to an event for your guys to eat on. You usually got to do a photo shoot the minute you get there. They give you a bag, a gym bag, UFC bag full of different clothes, like UFC gear when you get there. There's a lot of stuff people don't know about, but something else they don't know about that I thought you guys might find interesting is when they go to wrap your hands, they want to do it very early in the night. And it's extremely, I don't know how many of you guys have fought or had your hands wrapped before, but by the time they wrap your hands and then put the gloves on, which inevitably don't fit, and they have to cut and try to do, different things, at least with my giant hands. They always seem to want to put gloves on you that are too small, or at least in my, experience, they always want to put gloves on me that were too small. Then they had to try to fix them at the last minute to get them to fit. It's like a really complicated process, and they do it sometimes like an hour and a half or 2 hours before you fight. You got to have your gloves on, which is not, you start losing circulation in your feelings 2 minutes after they put them on there. So your fingers are purple by the time you're ready to fight, except John Jones. I don't know. He somehow keeps his limbered with circulation so he can poke people in the eyes. I had two different stories that were kind of entertaining. Not exactly finishing with a bang here on this episode. If I wanted to finish with a bang, I'd have told you the story about the time I got molested last, all right? Anyway, the first time they ever wrapped my hands, a guy named Leon was doing it. He was doesn't matter what color he was, but he was an old black guy, probably like 85 years old. He did a great job wrapping my hands. He's back there wrapping them, and we get talking because you're doing anything to keep your mind off a fight when you're getting ready to fight in the UFC. You can hear the whole building shake when you're fighting, when guys are fighting before you, and you're seeing guys come back in the locker room and just their faces just beat to hell, or the guys that won come back celebrating. It's like an emotional roller coaster, because you're going to be one of the two guys, or maybe you'll be both. Maybe you'll be beat to hell and the winner. My very first fight, this guy Leon was wrapping my hands, and he got talking to him about how he used to manage in boxing. I asked him how he got started wrapping hands. He goes, well, I'm actually used to be a boxing manager and trainer. And I said, oh, really? Who's the best fighter you ever trained? And I think he said Bernard Hopkins. I'm pretty sure it was Bernard Hopkins that he used to train. I was like, did you really? He said, yeah, I was his manager and his trainer. And then he told me, like Leon Spinks and a couple other, famous fighters that he managed and trained. And I said, what made you get out of it? And he said, they just kept not wanting to pay me. He said, you have an agreement with the guy, even if you have a contract with the guy at the, by the time they get paid, they don't want to pay you, even though you've trained them for, 12 weeks or whatever, years or whatever. You've been with them forever. You wrap their hands. You're their cut man. You're their manager. You help them set up fights, and then you're owed your 10%, and they don't want to pay you, especially when they get, if they get $1 million payday or something. They're like, well, I don't really feel like I owe you $100,000 for wrapping my hands and being my cut man and, training me or whatever. So he said it was a constant problem, but he told me a story about, like I said, the guy's 90 years old at this point, but he told me a story about how, I don't want to throw Bernard Hopkins under the bus or anything like that. I think it was Bernard Hopkins or another fighter like that. A really named fighter had tried to not pay him any of his money, and he said he ended up having to take him to court, and the court costs ended up being more than he even got awarded for his judgment or his settlement, which is typically the way things work. The lawyers take everything, so he won the case, but ended up losing money on the whole deal. So he said from that point on, I had signed contracts that were ironclad, this and that, all this different stuff. And he told me a story about another guy trying to pull it on him and how he, stopped him from ripping him off. And so trying to lighten the mood because I was stressed, I said, you got to get up pretty early in the century to fool old Leon. And he goes, that's right. And of course, everybody in the locker room starts laughing, not realizing that because he's so old, I said early in the century. I can't believe I just explained that joke to you guys. If you didn't get it, you don't deserve to get it. But there was that one. And then my next fight, I had requested bigger gloves because the last ones didn't fit. And Burt Watson actually went off on me, cussing me out when I got to the event, called one of his drivers up and started screaming at me, telling me if I got a problem to say it to him. And, he didn't do this. It's not his fault the gloves didn't fit. And I said, Burt, I got to be honest with you. I have no idea what you're talking about. And I said, I didn't say anything about my gloves. And Bert's like, somebody said you were complaining about the gloves. I said, no, I didn't say anything. So apparently it was someone else that was complaining about their gloves, even though I did tell him that my gloves were 2 sizes too small last time, that they gave me 2X and I needed 4X. But Bert ended up apologizing to me and telling me, I'm sorry, I thought it was you. I was like, no, but I let him give me a tongue lashing for 3 minutes about how I better stop thinking, that I'm, bigger than I am, and I'm coming in there and trying to run the show and blah, blah, blah. I just kept listening to him as he trashed me, and I finally said, I have no idea what you're talking about, but I'm sorry you're upset. They still gave me 3X gloves, not 4X like I requested, and so, again, they wrap my hands, the gloves don't fit. It's my time, I guess the fights, this is my second or third fight in the UFC. It's time for me to go out, and I can't go out because I can't get my gloves on. Like, I literally can't. They don't fit, and we've been doing it for 20 minutes back there, and the fights were going faster than they anticipated. But so Stitch comes back, and he's cutting the seam up my glove. He's trying to tape it back because he cut it too far. It's just a shit show back there, and they keep yelling, it's time to go. And I'm like, my gloves aren't on yet or taped. I don't know what to tell you. They don't fit. And they had been looking for a bigger pair of gloves for me for, an hour. So Stitch decides he's just going to have to pull them on. And, if you don't know if you guys know Stitch Duran, but he was a very popular guy who was never friends with Dana White, apparently. He's trying to get them on. He asked me, he goes, anybody ever tell you look like Brock Lesnar? Like when he was back there doing that? And I said, sometimes. Anybody ever tell you look just like Geraldo Rivera? And he was like, never. And, of course, everyone starts laughing. It's whoever's left in the locker room. His hair was like immaculate. Stitch's wasn't. It was spray, like hair sprayed. It was like, ironclad. It was not moving. And it smelled fabulous. Like, I don't know what he was using, what hair products, but he was leaning into the glove and trying to pull and do all this. And the whole time his hair is right in my face. Like his head is right under my nose. And I said, Stitch, I got to tell you, buddy, your hair smells fabulous. I said, it smells even better than it looks. And then, he starts laughing while he's trying to get the glove on, which makes it harder. Everybody else is laughing. Meanwhile, I'm stressed on my mind that I can't get my gloves on. So they ended up just rigging it and taping it however they could. And then I went out and got my ass kicked. And I, to this day, blame my gloves not fitting for why I lost the fight, even though it had nothing to do with it. So, I don't know. I figured I'd give you guys that little short story. And like I said, if there's too many ums and too many pauses or too many coughs or whatever during this episode, so be it. I'm not going to go through with fine-tooth comb anymore and try to perfect everything when it doesn't really make a difference in the listening experience anyway. Or if it does, tell me in the comments how much it sucks, and I'll go back to spending 3 hours trying to cut out every imperfection. So that's it for this week. I'm going to try to put another one of these out next week. Hopefully, like I said, we can get my watch hours back and YouTube doesn't screw me again, and I can actually start doing these more regularly. Not like it's going to make much of a difference money-wise, but it would just be nice if you're doing something for YouTube to not stick you on the watch hours and remove them or keep coming up with the reason why they can't pay you. So, well, see you guys later. That's it.